In this video, sometimes life doesn't change when others become kind, it changes when you finally choose yourself.
The night felt heavy, as if the whole world was quietly waiting for something it could not name, and if someone had been writing this story by hand, their fingers would have trembled across the page. The wind slid through the dark forest like a whisper, brushing leaves, carrying secrets, and somewhere ahead torches glowed as voices murmured over a decision that was about to change a girl's entire life. Her name was Alina, and she walked barefoot across the cold ground with her wrists tied and her heart shaking. Behind her, her sisters pretended not to meet her eyes while they spoke with the men from the rival pack, bargaining like traitors who had convinced themselves that survival was more important than love. Her oldest sister quietly said it was for the good of the family, telling Alina not to make things harder, but the words felt thin and empty like smoke drifting away. Alina wanted to ask why, wanted to shout that she was not something to be exchanged, yet fear tightened her throat until only a broken breath escaped. The rival pack leader looked at her like an object, not a person, and when the rope pulled tighter, she felt smaller than she had ever felt before. Far away, past mountains wrapped in silver mist, a dark castle stood like a sleeping beast against the horizon. This was the kingdom of the vampire king Lucian. People spoke his name in low voices and shared stories that painted him as cold, distant, and cruel. They said he was older than they could imagine, that he ruled the night like it belonged only to him, and that no one who crossed him ever forgot it. But the truth of Lucian lived beyond rumors. Alone in the tallest tower, with candlelight touching only half his face, he felt something strange inside his chest, a gentle heartbeat that did not belong to him, frightened yet familiar, reaching across the darkness. For centuries he had seen flashes of someone in dreams, a girl with sad eyes whose presence vanished every time he tried to reach for her. Tonight the feeling returned, stronger than ever, and although he had taught himself not to chase illusions, something inside him refused to ignore it. Back in the forest, Alina stumbled and fell, tasting dirt and cold earth. The men dragged her onward toward the camp, dark tents, heavy weapons, quiet wolves, while her sisters turned their backs and walked away, whispering apologies as if those words could erase betrayal. Tied to a post, Alina felt loneliness settle deep in her chest. She did not pray to be rescued. She only prayed not to disappear. The men laughed somewhere nearby, unaware that the air was slowly changing. The night grew colder. Torches flickered. A strange quiet wrapped the camp, like the world listening very carefully. Alone on his balcony, Lucian listened too. He heard something softer than a cry, the sound of a heart breaking. His eyes softened, almost human, and he simply said to prepare the horses. He did not tell anyone why, he only said that someone was lost. In the forest, Alina felt it before she saw anything. Something unseen watched her, not with hunger or cruelty, but with a quiet, powerful sense of protection. Without knowing why, she whispered for help, asking whoever might be listening not to let the rest of her be taken. Far across the night, Lucian's breath caught as though the words had been spoken inside his chest. In that moment he understood. The heartbeat he had searched for across lifetimes belonged to her. Thunder rolled somewhere distant. Unease moved through the rival pack as the torches dimmed. Alina lifted her head and saw a tall shadow step from the trees, silent and steady, with eyes that glowed softly like embers. Fear faded, replaced by an aching sense of safety she couldn't explain. The men reached for weapons, instincts rising, yet before anyone could act, the last of the flames flickered and vanished into darkness, leaving only silence, breath, and the presence of the vampire king standing between her and the future she feared. The darkness did not feel violent. It felt intentional, like the night itself had decided to wrap Alina in silence. The men cursed softly, moving blindly, their confidence breaking the moment the torches died. Alina could barely breathe. Her wrists still hurt, but something new pressed gently against her fear, the awareness that whoever stood in the shadows was not here to harm her. When the wind finally shifted, she saw him more clearly. The stranger stepped forward, tall and composed, with eyes that seemed to hold centuries inside them. His presence did not scream power, it whispered it. And for the first time, the rival pack fell quiet, as if their instincts recognized a king long before their minds did. Lucian did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the rope around Alina's wrists, at the dirt on her skin, at the quiet tears she had been trying so hard to hide, and something old inside him ached. He spoke only one word, enough. The men stiffened. The rival leader tried to mask his unease with anger, demanding to know who he thought he was. Lucian's gaze shifted toward him, calm and unblinking, and the question died on the man's tongue. There was no threat, no show of strength, just a presence that made it impossible to lie to oneself about who truly held power here. Lucian walked closer, each step deliberate, and the wolves themselves backed away. When he stood before Alina, he did not touch her immediately. Instead, he watched her face as if asking permission without speaking. She felt seen in a way that frightened her and comforted her at the same time. His voice softened, lower, almost human. "Who did this to you?" The answer caught in her throat. She wasn't afraid of him, she was afraid of telling the truth. If she spoke, something inside her life would break completely. So she whispered the only words she could manage: everyone. A quiet tremor moved through Lucian's chest, not anger, sadness. He took the rope between his fingers and snapped it gently, as if freeing her was the most natural thing he had ever done. The rival pack leader protested, talking about agreements, about ownership, about deals made with her family. Lucian turned his head slowly, and the knight seemed to lean forward with him. "She is not property," he said. There was no debate after that. The men stepped back not because they were defeated, but because something in Lucian's voice made cruelty feel small and embarrassing. Alina rubbed her wrists, feeling strange, free, yet unsure what freedom meant now. She didn't run, she didn't collapse. She simply stood there, shaking quietly, unsure if she had just been saved or placed into a new unknown fate. Lucian offered his cloak, letting it rest softly over her shoulders. The gesture was simple, but to Alina it felt like being handed back pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. "You will come with me," he said gently, not as a command, but as a promise. She hesitated. Going with him meant leaving everything behind: the pain, the betrayal, the only life she had known. She looked back at the direction her sisters had gone and felt tears burn her eyes. Lucian noticed. His voice softened even more. "People do desperate things when they are afraid," he said quietly. "Fear does not always excuse them, but it explains more than anger ever will." They began to walk through the forest. The darkness parted for them like it recognized its king. The path grew quieter with every step, and Alina slowly realized she wasn't afraid of the night anymore. Instead, she was afraid of the questions rising inside her. Who was he? Why had he come? Why did his presence feel like something she had known in dreams? She finally whispered the question that had been pressing against her chest. "Why did you save me?" Lucian did not answer immediately. He listened to the wind, to the faraway owls, to the quiet beating of their hearts. Then softly he said, "Because I have spent a lifetime losing the people I was meant to protect, and tonight, the world refused to let me make that mistake again." The castle appeared far in the distance, dark and vast against the sky. Alina's breath caught, not out of fear but awe. She had always imagined monsters lived inside walls like those, and yet the only monster she had seen tonight had been the cruelty of people who claimed love. The closer they came, the more she felt that strange pull again, a thread tying her to him, to this night, to something bigger than pain or betrayal. Lucian felt it too. He did not show it, but his hands tightened slightly at his sides, as if he were bracing himself for a truth he wasn't ready to face. When they reached the great gates, they opened slowly, as though recognizing the presence of someone long expected. Servants stared, whispering in shock at the sight of the trembling girl wrapped in the king's cloak. No one dared question him, yet their eyes carried worry and curiosity. Lucian guided Alina inside with quiet patience, letting her move at her own pace. Every hallway seemed filled with echoes of stories never told. Every step felt like walking deeper into fate. He brought her to a warm chamber with soft firelight and clean water and stood at the door instead of crossing inside. His tone was gentle, respectful. "You are safe here, rest, eat, no one will harm you." She looked at him, searching his face not for answers but for truth. "Will you leave?" she whispered, surprising herself with her own fear. Lucian paused, his eyes softened in a way that felt more intimate than any touch. "No," he said quietly, "but there is something I need to understand. Before I tell you why." He closed the door slowly, leaving her wrapped in warmth, while he remained in the corridor, standing still, listening to that mysterious heartbeat echoing softly through the walls. Somewhere deep in the castle, an old prophecy he had ignored for centuries began to stir like dust in sunlight, a promise of a bond that could heal or destroy. And as Alina sat by the fire, touching the cloak and feeling its strange comfort, she realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Her life had not ended in the forest. It had just begun. And the question that now quietly haunted both of them was the same. What were they truly meant to each other? The answer waited in the next night, silent and patient, and neither of them was ready for how deeply it would change them. The castle felt different by morning. Soft light slid across stone walls, chasing away shadows that had lived there longer than most memories. Servants moved quietly, speaking in low voices, unsure what the presence of the strange girl might mean. Alina woke slowly, not with fear, but with confusion, as if waking from a dream that still clung to her skin. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the warmth of the cloak wrapped around her shoulders reminded her the vampire king had brought her here and had promised she was safe. She sat up and listened. There were no chains, no threats, only the soft crackle of the fire. Part of her wanted to believe this piece, but another part, shaped by betrayal, whispered not to trust too quickly. She touched her wrists, still sore from the ropes, and breath through the ache. Safety felt strange, fragile, like something that could disappear if she blinked too long. Outside her door, Lucian stood with his hands behind his back, listening to the faint sounds of life within the room. He had not slept. Vampires did not need sleep the way humans did, but this night had held him awake for a different reason. Something inside him refused to quiet. The heartbeat that was not his pulsed faintly somewhere in the castle, always leading him back to her. Responsibility weighed on him, but it wasn't the cold duty of a king. It was something softer, unfamiliar, dangerous, and deeply human. A soft knock came from inside. "May I come out?" Alina's voice carried both courage and hesitation. Lucian opened the door gently, making sure not to startle her. Sunlight touched his face, revealing lines of thought and centuries of restraint. He did not look like a monster. He looked like someone who had carried silence for far too long. "Of course," he said quietly. "This is your home now for as long as you choose to stay." The word surprised her. Choose. No one had used that word with her before. They walked slowly through the halls. Lucian matched his pace to hers, never walking ahead, never pulling her forward. He showed her the gardens where night flowers still glowed faintly from the moonlight they had gathered. Cold air brushed her cheeks, but it felt gentle, not cruel. She watched birds weaving through vines, and for the first time in days, her body loosened. "This place is not what I expected," she said softly. Lucian gave a slight, thoughtful smile. "People rarely are, places rarely are. Most fear comes from what we imagine, not what truly exists." They stopped beside an old fountain. Water slid over stone, carrying memories with it. Alina watched the ripples and finally gathered the courage to speak the fear she had been holding. "What happens now?" He studied the water too, as if searching for answers there. "Now," he said, "you heal, you rest, you remember who you are without the voices that tried to own you." She swallowed gently. "And you, why do I feel like you knew me before we ever met?" Lucian went still. How could he explain centuries of dreams? How could he tell her that he had seen her face across lifetimes, always slipping away before he could reach her? He feared that speaking too soon might trap her, and he did not want to bind her with destiny. He wanted her to choose. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the heart recognizes what the mind has not yet learned to understand." His honesty calmed rather than frightened her. Later, when Alina ate warm bread and fruit in the dining hall, she noticed how everyone moved around Lucian, not terrified, but respectful, like people who trusted someone who had protected them quietly for longer than history remembered. The servants smiled at her shyly. Someone placed extra honey by her plate as though making a silent promise that she belonged. Still, whispers followed. "Who is she? Why her?" And somewhere deep beneath the castle, old magic stirred, not dark, not dangerous, simply awakened. That night, Lucian went to the library, filled with books older than kingdoms. He traced his fingers over an ancient page. It spoke of a rare connection, not ownership, not control, but a bond meant to teach a king compassion and give a lost heart a home. The words unsettled him. Fate could be cruel when misunderstood. He did not want Alina trapped by something she did not choose. Meanwhile, Alina stood at her window looking at the moon. Silence wrapped around her gently. For the first time, she spoke to herself without fear. I am still here. Tears came, but not the painful kind. They felt like rain washing dust from stone. She thought about her sisters, not with hatred, but with quiet sadness. People break when they are afraid. People hurt others when they cannot see another way. It still hurt, but she refused to let that hurt poison her. A soft knock sounded. Lucian stood there, calm, almost uncertain. Walk with me, he asked. They wandered through the candlelit halls, their footsteps echoing softly. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. There was comfort in simply sharing space. When they reached the balcony, wind moved through his cloak and the world stretched wide below them. There is something I must tell you, he finally said, voice steady but gentle. Our meeting was not accidental. Her heart tightened not from fear but from anticipation. For years I saw you in visions, he continued, not as a possession, not as a promise, as someone whose pain echoed mine. Every time you vanished, I felt like the world had taken something I did not yet understand. Alina held onto the railing, absorbing his words slowly. And now that you are here, he said softly, I refuse to let fate decide anything for you. What happens next will happen because you choose it, not prophecy, not fear, not me. The honesty stunned her. Kings demanded, monsters trapped, but Lucian offered freedom. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw not a creature of night, but a soul who had lived too long with silence and responsibility. For the first time, her voice didn't tremble. Then for now, I choose to stay. The night air shifted warmly around them as if the world approved. Somewhere far away, a distant howl rose, not threatening but watchful. The rival pack had not forgotten. Neither had her past. Consequences always find their way home. Lucian heard it too. His jaw tightened faintly, not in fear but in promise. Alina felt it, the quiet storm approaching. And yet, instead of shrinking, she stood taller inside herself. Because for the first time in her life, she would not face what came next alone. The decision to stay changed something quiet but powerful inside Alina. It was not a loud declaration. It was simply a steady acceptance that her life was no longer in the hands of those who traded her away. Over the next days, the castle learned to move around her presence as if it had always expected her. Footsteps softened when she passed. Conversations paused with warmth instead of suspicion. She began to feel the difference between fear-based silence and peaceful silence, and it surprised her how healing peace could be. Lucian watched from a respectful distance. He never hovered, never trapped her in conversation, yet somehow he appeared every time she began to doubt herself. Sometimes they walked the gardens in quiet. Sometimes he listened while she spoke about simple memories, childhood laughter, hidden fears, the ache of wanting to belong. He never rushed her grief. He let it unfold like slow rain, and his patience became its own kind of protection. One afternoon, Alina stood in the training courtyard where young guards practiced discipline without cruelty. She watched as Lucian gently corrected a nervous trainee, not with anger but with steady guidance. He spoke about control, about strength guided by conscience. She had always imagined kings as loud, commanding, relentless, yet he led with presence, not volume. Something inside her softened further. Maybe monsters did not look like the stories said. Maybe they were simply people who forgot compassion. That night, however, the peace cracked. A messenger arrived at the gates, exhausted, carrying news wrapped in fear. The rival pack had begun to move, not with open war, but with whispers, letters, and rumors meant to paint Lucian as a thief and Alina as a traitor. Lies spread easily because fear welcomed them. Lucian read the message in silence. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in deep disappointment at how humans and wolves alike could choose cruelty so easily. Alina saw the letter in his hands and felt guilt rise unexpectedly, even though none of this had been her fault. She had spent a lifetime believing that other people's choices were somehow her burden to carry. She stepped forward, hesitating. This is because of me. Lucian shook his head gently. No, this is because some hearts choose power over truth. He paused and looked at her with the kind of honesty that did not hide behind comforting lies. But yes, they will use your name to reach me, and we must face that together. The word together steadied her. A council was called in the main hall. Advisors spoke with careful tones, discussing strategy, protection, reputation. They bowed to Lucian, but now they also glanced toward Alina not as an intruder, but as someone connected to whatever future was forming. She sat quietly, feeling the weight of eyes yet refusing to shrink. For once, she wanted to be present for decisions that shaped her life. When the room emptied, Lucian remained with her. "If you wish to leave," he said softly, "I will ensure your safety far from all of this. Your freedom matters more than anything that could be written about us." She surprised herself by shaking her head. "Running taught me nothing. Staying teaches me who I am." Her voice was steady, not stubborn, simply honest. Lucian studied her, and pride flickered gently in his expression, not as ownership, but as admiration for her quiet courage. Later, as night folded around the castle, the air grew colder not from weather but from memory. Alina found herself walking to the old chapel near the eastern wall, a place meant for reflection rather than worship. Candles glowed softly, filling the room with gentle warmth. She sat alone on a bench, letting silence cradle her thoughts. She thought about her sisters, about choices made out of fear, and about the strange thread that had led her here. She whispered into the empty air, "I don't hate them, but I won't go back." Lucian stood unseen in the doorway, hearing the sincerity in her voice. He did not interrupt, he simply understood. Compassion, he realized, did not erase boundaries, it strengthened them. When he finally stepped inside, their eyes met in quiet acknowledgement. No grand speeches, no heavy promises, just two lives learning how to breathe near one another without hiding. Then suddenly, the candles flickered. A chill passed through the chapel, not threatening but prophetic. Old stones seemed to hum softly, as though remembering forgotten truths. Lucian felt the subtle shift immediately, the kind of magic that belonged not to spells or curses but to destiny aligning with courage. "What is that?" Alina whispered. He looked at the trembling flame, then at her, with a seriousness that carried centuries behind it. "Something has awakened, not danger, not yet. Something that responds when a heart chooses to live instead of survive." Her breath caught, not fear, awe. Outside, a distant howl echoed again through the mountains, closer now, carrying warning and curiosity. The past was moving toward them step by step, but this time Alina did not feel like prey. She felt steadier, more grounded, more herself. Standing beside her, Lucian felt a similar truth taking shape, a realization that whatever connection existed between them was not here to trap either of them, but to test who they chose to become. And as the last candle steadied itself, the night seemed to whisper a promise. What comes next will reveal who truly has courage, those who rule through fear or those who choose compassion. Part 4 closed quietly, not with fear, but with a deeper question settling between them both, a question neither was ready to answer, yet neither could avoid the days that followed felt like the quiet before a storm. No one said it aloud, but everyone sensed it. The rival pack was circling, testing boundaries, sending spies, spreading rumors. Yet inside the castle, something different was happening. Alina was learning how to exist without fear as the center of every decision. She helped in the kitchens, carried blankets to elders, and listened to stories from the children who lived within the castle walls. Slowly, gently, life began to stitch pieces of her heart back together. Lucian watched this transformation with a kind of awe he did not show openly. Centuries had taught him how to command armies, negotiate peace, and face darkness, but he had never learned how to watch someone heal in front of him. Sometimes, late at night, he walked the empty corridors and wondered why fate had waited so long to cross their paths. He did not want to trap her inside destiny. He wanted to protect the space where she could choose who to become. One evening, the quiet broke. A captured messenger was brought to the main hall, young, frightened, clearly pushed into duty he did not choose. He carried a sealed letter marked with the rival pack's crest. Lucian dismissed the guards and spoke gently instead of intimidating him. The boy's shoulders slowly relaxed, surprised by kindness. The letter revealed the truth. The rival pack wanted Alina returned, not out of concern, but because they feared losing power if their betrayal became public. They offered negotiation, wrapped in threat. Alina listened as Lucian read. Her chest tightened, not with panic, with clarity. For the first time, she saw how control disguised itself as family, duty, and honor. She realized that if she went back, nothing would change. She would simply disappear again inside someone else's fear. Lucian looked at her, never deciding for her. Their words mean little, he said softly. What matters is what you want. She took a slow breath. I want my life to be mine. I want truth, even if it is difficult. There was strength in her voice, not loud but steady. The boy who brought the message lowered his eyes, ashamed of the pack he served. Lucian placed a hand on his shoulder and told him he would be fed, warmed, and allowed to rest before returning. Compassion spread quietly through the room like light from a candle. That night, Alina walked the inner courtyard alone. Moonlight spilled across the stones, silver and calm. For the first time, she did not feel hunted. She thought of the girl who had once walked barefoot through the forest with ropes on her wrists, and she felt something new, respect for herself. She whispered, almost to the night, I survived, and I am not defined by what was done to me. A presence stirred gently nearby. Lucian stepped from the shadows, not as a king, not as a legend, simply as someone who did not want her to face the night alone. They stood side by side, saying nothing for a while. Silence no longer felt empty, it felt shared. Finally, he spoke. The rival pack will come, not with honor, with fear, and fear always tries to control what it does not understand. She nodded, and what do we do? He looked at the moon. We stand in truth. We do not meet fear with cruelty, we meet it with boundaries. And if they cross those boundaries, then we protect what must be protected. There was no threat in his tone, there was promise. They walked along the path, the sound of their steps soft against stone. Lucian told her pieces of his past, not everything, only enough to reveal that he too had once been betrayed by those he trusted. Loss had taught him caution. Centuries had taught him patience. But meeting her had taught him something different. Compassion did not weaken strength, it guided it. Alina listened, realizing something important. He was not rescuing her out of pity. He was standing beside her out of recognition, two souls who had both survived, both learning how to choose life rather than simply endure it. Later in the library, she found an old book with faded pages. It spoke softly of bonds that formed not out of possession but out of shared purpose. Faded did not mean chained. It meant called to grow, to learn, to become more humane, even inside darkness. Her chest warmed as she read, not because it promised romance, but because it promised growth. Lucian entered quietly, watching her eyes move across the words. He said nothing at first, then he spoke gently. Whatever we are meant to be, I will never decide it without you. Fate may open doors, but we choose which ones to walk through. She closed the book and met his gaze. Gratitude washed through her, not the kind that bows, but the kind that stands taller. Outside, thunder rolled far in the distance. Scouts reported movement near the borders. The rival pack was closer than ever. Instead of shrinking back, Alina straightened her shoulders. Fear existed, yes, but it no longer ruled her. As Lucian prepared the castle to face whatever was coming, he paused at the balcony and looked down at the courtyard where she stood. The wind wrapped around her like quiet armor. He realized then that this story was not about rescuing someone fragile. It was about walking beside someone who had finally remembered her strength. And as night deepened, both of them felt the same truth forming in silence. The real test was no longer survival. The real test was who they would choose to be when the past finally arrived at their door. The night arrived quietly, without thunder or drama, the way big moments often do. The rival pack gathered at the border, not charging, not shouting, just waiting. Tension hummed across the land like an invisible string pulled too tight. Inside the castle, no one panicked. The guards were ready, the people protected, and Lucian stood at the gates with the stillness of someone who had spent centuries learning when to fight and when simply to stand. Alina stood beside him. Not behind him, not hidden, beside him. Fear touched her, of course. Fear always visits before important choices, but it did not rule her. She remembered the ropes, the betrayal, the long walk into darkness. She remembered how small she had once felt. Now, as the gates opened slowly, she felt grounded, steady, and quietly sure of who she was becoming. The rival pack leader stepped forward, eyes sharp, lips tight with pride and insecurity woven together. Her sisters were there too, standing farther back, their faces pale with regret and fear. They had expected to see Alina broken, controlled, miserable. Instead, they saw a woman standing next to a king, not owned, not claimed, simply present. The leader spoke first, demanding her return, speaking about family honor, obligations, debts. His voice wrapped cruelty in pretty language. Lucian listened without interrupting, calm and unbreakable. When the man finished, Lucian turned to Alina, not offering an answer, but asking. Your life, he said gently, belongs to you. Speak your truth. Every eye turned to her. Her heart beat once hard, then she stepped forward. I loved my family, she said, her voice steady, not accusing. I tried to be what they wanted. I tried to fix things that were never mine to fix, and when fear came, they chose to sell me instead of stand with me. She swallowed softly. I do not hate them, but I will not return to a place where love means losing myself. Her sisters began to cry, not dramatic weeping, the quiet, painful tears of people finally seeing the damage they had chosen to ignore. The pack leader scoffed, trying to regain control, trying to twist her words, but Lucian lifted one hand and the world seemed to still. She is not an object, he said calmly. There is no discussion, there are no bargains, there is only her decision, and her decision is final. The rival pack tried one last threat, but their power came from fear, and fear loses its teeth when people choose truth. Seeing they could not intimidate him and seeing the castle ready, they retreated slowly, not defeated by force, but by a boundary they couldn't cross. Alina watched them leave, her chest tightening, but this time not with grief, with release. Her sisters lingered. They walked closer, hesitant, unsure if they had the right. One of them whispered through tears, "We were afraid. We thought survival meant sacrifice. We were wrong." They didn't ask her to come back. They didn't beg forgiveness. They simply said the only honest words they had, "We're sorry." Alina listened, and something gentle unfolded inside her. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It did not erase pain, but it freed her from holding bitterness like a weight on her shoulders. I hope you choose better lives, she said softly, for yourselves and for anyone who trusts you. They nodded, humbled, then left with the pack not victorious but changed. When the gates closed, the castle breathed again. Life returned slowly, naturally. Children laughed, conversations resumed. The tension dissolved like fog under sunlight. Alina walked to the gardens, sitting by the fountain where the journey inside herself had begun. Lucian joined her quietly, not claiming the moment, simply sharing it. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "You did not just survive tonight. You chose who you would be." She smiled softly, eyes warm. "And you didn't save me. You walked beside me while I learned how to stand." He looked at her, truly looked, and there was gratitude in his expression, not ownership. Whatever fate once promised, he said, it was never about chains, it was about growth, about compassion, about two lives reminding each other what dignity looks like. The word mate no longer sounded like destiny trapping someone. It sounded like a path, open, patient, honest. They did not rush anything. There was no dramatic declaration, no promises made too soon. They chose something stronger than instant romance. They chose time, the time to heal, the time to learn one another, time to build something real instead of something written by fear. As seasons shifted, Alina became someone people sought for guidance, not because she was connected to a king, but because she understood pain and still chose kindness. Lucian changed too, becoming softer in the places where loneliness had once lived, wiser in the way he led. Together, they built a kingdom defined not by fear, but by boundaries, truth, and quiet compassion. And sometimes, when the wind moved gently through the gardens at night, Alina would pause and smile, grateful not for the crown, not for the castle, but for the moment she chose herself. Because that choice had rewritten everything.